Okay, good evening everyone, and thank you so much for joining us to talk about the New Economy Network Australia, NENA, and our really brave effort, I think, to build a national strategy for civil society's new economy. So we're actually calling it, I think, the Civil Society for a New Strategy for a New Economy. This evening, I'm really pleased to be able to invite two very special guests, colleagues that I work with, Mary Graham and Ross Williams. I'll do a proper introduction in a moment, but what I'd like to do first is an acknowledgement of country. So I would like to acknowledge the elders past, present and future on the land on which I live, work and play. I'm in Brisbane, which is the country of the Yagara and Turrbal peoples. And my acknowledgement of country always includes a recognition of the rather wonderful ancient culture with which we now are privileged to live on this continent with, and I'm always very grateful for the caring for country for millennia that brought us to this place where we have such an amazing environment. My acknowledgement of country personally also always includes an acknowledgement of the impacts, past, present and ongoing, of colonisation. And I guess I like to situate myself as a descendant of the Irish English folks who came to Australia. So I think it's nice to acknowledge country, acknowledge the ancient wisdom of the First Nations peoples, but also acknowledge that I am a descendant of some of the folks who caused a bit of a ruckus on this continent. So I'm deeply indebted to the work ahead of us all that we do together. So in a minute, I'm going to introduce the wonderful Mary Graham and Ross Williams. But before I do that, I'd like very much to share with you all just a brief reminder or summary about the New Economy Network Australia. Now, many of you already know a lot about NENA, but on every single call, I kind of peruse the names as they come in, and there's always a few folks who are new to the New Economy Network. So I won't take too long. Oh, that's not what you want to see. Nobody wants to see the internal machinations of my diary and filing system. Apologies, folks. I'll try again. This is what you want to see. All right, that's better. So very quickly, the New Economy Network Australia is up to many, many wonderful activities at the moment. Tonight's focus is to remind everybody that we're developing this process to help people provide their own input into what we're calling the Civil Society Strategy for a New Economy. It has the potential to be really quite an exciting project because we're inviting people all throughout the NENA membership and beyond, anybody in Australia who would like to share with us their ideas about which parts of the economy need to be changed, transformed and improved, or which parts of our economic system are really important and worthy and need to be strengthened and made better. Sorry, just playing with my buttons. So I'm going to quickly remind everyone about NENA, why we need the new economy and why we have a national network. Again, because a lot of folks are new to NENA and many of us have been bubbling along, working as volunteers, building this network for many years. So I think it's respectful to remind everybody who we are and what we're doing. So NENA is a network of individuals and civil society organisations working to transform the economic system so that achieving ecological health and social and economic justice are both the foundational principles and the main objectives of the entire economic system. And we've deliberately kept the kind of core elements of what we're aiming to achieve at a very high level of ecological health, social justice, because these two branches of the same tree are what we believe creates a well-being economy, a space where our society can flourish, and the economy is just one element of helping to support the human beings inside that economy. NENA works to facilitate connections and promote projects, build peer-to-peer learning. I won't read the whole thing, but our website tells you a lot about NENA. I think the main thing to know is that it's built literally by the people for the people. We're all volunteers, there's no funding, although we're cheerfully engaging in conversations with friends and colleagues in the government and large corporate spaces. NENA is first and foremost a community, grassroots and civil society space for all of us to connect with each other, as it's written there, across geographic areas, towns, cities, places, and also across and between the very different sectors such as food, energy, transport, housing, Indigenous or First Nations economics. So we have these sectoral spaces within NENA, but if you slice it another way, we also have these geographic spaces. I'm not going to read the full slide, but from day one, our 5 core principles have been about ecological sustainability, social and economic justice, democracy, or at least ensuring participation by as many people as possible, place-based and emphasising locality, and acknowledging and affirming and being good allies with the sovereign nations of the First Peoples of Australia. Why we need a new economy? I'm sure you wouldn't be joining this webinar on a Wednesday evening if you didn't already know that, so I'll keep this very brief. Those of us who've been working across all the different sectors, and by us I mean the thousands of people who now connect with NENA and the hundreds of people who are paid members, we know that the current economic system is not sustainable and it's not socially just, not across the board anyway. The current dominant economic system, consumer capitalism, growth economics, neoliberal economics, however you want to describe it, is not sustainable. And particularly since the great acceleration of technology and consumption in the 1950s, we really are seeing an escalation of impacts on our beautiful planet Earth. There's a lovely analysis in the work that we do within NENA, but I'm sure you have your own, about how did we get here? How did we get to this place where humanity is eating up too much and extracting too much from the living world? But what I will mention is these incredibly powerful slides that I borrowed from Will Steffen from the Climate Council, which talk about the great acceleration since the 1950s. This is one of the great drivers for me personally. My work is trying to respond to the fact that since the 1950s, we've seen Earth system trends where pollution and impacts are increasing. So if anyone can hear thumping in the background, my 2 dogs have chosen to tap dance around on the timber floors. I'm very sorry. My daughter is now rectifying the situation. My apologies. And in addition, there's socioeconomic trends that are both responding to those Earth system trends, but also creating them, include everything from large-scale extraction of water, construction of dams, and so on. So it's these issues that have been emerging for hundreds of years through the global economy, but particularly in the 20th century, that NENA is very concerned about. And of course, the other element, the other branch of the tree is the injustices within, particularly the accumulative power of consumer capitalism. But that's enough of that. The main reason I wanted to give that very brief context is to remind us what's at stake and the reason we need a new economy network, and at least why hundreds of us decided to form it up a couple of years ago, is because we feel at the moment, and I would suggest particularly since 2012, federal governments and state governments are not taking seriously the threats that we face, both through climate change and accelerating environmental deterioration. This is dogs again. Good grief. Sorry, guys. But also because of failure to really address the root causes of social and economic injustice. Please hold for a moment. Okay, I'm begging my daughter, but she's ignoring me. Oh, this is terrible. All right. And so in a nutshell, what NENA is really interested in is the power of creating a new reality. The resistance, challenging the dominant economic paradigm and all of the negative consequences that come with it are very important. But I guess in a way, the work of folks who are able to create a bright and shiny vision for something different is really what I guess excites some of us about NENA. When we came together, we recognize and give absolute credit and respect to the decades and decades and decades of people in the Australian system who've been working on a whole range of new economy, alternative economy, community economy, ecological economics, social solidarity, the sharing economy, all of these different modes of being. And all NENA is trying to do is make it easier for all the people doing all of this terrific work to find each other, learn from each other, and really escalate our efforts together. I won't talk too much about our background, but for those who don't know, a number of us have been chatting through 2015 about the need or our craving to connect with other people around some of these issues. And so 2016, an initial conference was held. Bronwyn Morgan and myself, I think Bronwyn's on this call, so acknowledgement to my co-founder. We were dreaming up this idea of lots of other countries seem to have a civil society network for the economy. Australia had lots of sector-specific amazing groups, but what we wanted to do was see if we could bring everyone together. So we've had annual conferences. We've been spending a lot of time building the governance structure for NENA. Our activities now focus on, we have a lot of online events because of COVID, but before then our geographic hubs were having a lot of different events in place, the place that they lived. And we're also starting to build a lot of cross collaboration across different events and activities. So as I said, we're fundamentally a platform to bring people together, to find ways to share and strengthen our efforts. And if at any time your involvement with NENA means you've got ideas or you'd like to do things, bring webinars, expertise, anything, you know, I'll share the email at the end. I'm sure many of you know that as we are all in this together in an act of solidarity, all suggestions are wonderful and we really welcome them actually. I won't talk too much. We've worked on a distributed governance network. That basically means although we're incorporated as a legal entity in Australia, we're a cooperative, which we're really proud of. We've also woven into our structures a way to have different geographic hubs, different sectoral hubs, lots of different ways to slice up the pie and to get engaged and to share your knowledge and expertise and to access other people's. So we've got geographic and sectoral hubs that come and go, ebb and flow, it's all good. Lots of activities, things to mention, including the wonderful NENA journal that Duncan Wallace and Jacob Debitz have created and many of you have written for, and an ongoing range of webinars, online workshops, and other fun-filled activities. So how you can get involved is, I often say, choose your own adventure. We do urge people to become a member. If you're not already a member, please do think about it. It's a small amount of money, or you can use your Let's alternative currency scheme to join us and then get involved with a hub and lots of other things. And you can attend all of our events and webinars, whether you're a member or not. So the civil society strategy for a new economy, I'm just going to share a website with you in a moment, and then I'll wrap up and hand over. The context is helpful. Because what we wanted to do, it's fine to have these ongoing conversations and discussions and build a platform, have conferences, but what we wanted to do was aim for an annual or biannual, every 2 years, biennial way of really starting to bring people's ideas together to share the core elements of aspects we think we would like to focus on or shift or change. And so that's where the civil society strategy comes in. So one last share, which I hope will bring you to the right place. Yes, for anyone who doesn't know, that's our website, neweconomy.org.au. You can find out about most of the hubs on the left-hand side. You can find out about our conference and the directory and the journal. But tonight's focus is really, first and foremost, to ask you, to beg you, to get involved with putting your ideas into this civil society strategy. There's a little bit of info on this page. And I just noticed the link to the actual template we want you to fill out is broken. So that's awesome. I will make sure that we fix that up and make sure that people can join that as soon as possible. But what we've been doing is having these monthly discussions, and I'm only doing a big recap because we haven't met for about 6 or 7 weeks. But we do invite all of you to have a read about how you can provide input. And the template, we're inviting members to work inside their hubs wherever possible, because that kind of group work helps to synthesize your thinking on key issues. And in our other talks, we have had people from the Ecological Economics Hub, Food Hub, and other sectors and hubs talk to us about what they've been aiming to share with each other. So that is by way of background, and I hope that for some of you that helps give you an overview of what NENA's all about. For many of you, it's probably the 3rd or 4th time you've heard it. And now, without further ado, what I've done is invited Mary Graham and Ross Williams to share with us tonight just some initial thinking about what they would like to put into the civil society strategy for a new economy from it's called the First Nations Economics Hub, the NENA First Nations Hub, but it can be whatever First Nations, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples want to call the work that they're doing. So Mary, if you can unmute yourself, what I might do is just call up your slides, but perhaps you could introduce yourself while I dig around and find the right buttons.
Okay.
And so Mary Graham, thanks so much for joining us. Mary is an adjunct associate professor of political science at the University of Queensland, a Kombu Mary person from the Yugambeh language group, and Mary will tell you more about herself now. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And hello to everyone, and welcome to this organised event. As Michelle just said, I live down here on the Gold Coast in the Yugambeh peoples, Yugambeh language people of the Gold Coast. So the traditional people from here, and I acknowledge my elders. I still have elders, and also ancestors, ancestral spirit ancestors, our family ancestors, and so on of this region. So it's the Yugambeh speaking peoples area, the Gold Coast, basically. My own particular area, my father's people's mobs, is the Kombu. There were 7 or 8 different groups within it, within this area. It was from the Logan River down to the Tweed River and back to the foothills. And the Kombu were just exactly what you would call the Gold Coast is exact, from Southport to down to Coolangatta, basically. So my mother, she was a Waka Waka person. She came from a place, freshwater Aboriginal person from a place called Lagainda. But first of all, she was under the Act and also under the Act, but she was a Waka Waka person. So the Burnett River area was her mother's people's area. And my father wasn't under the Act, but when they married, he had to ask permission for her to come out from under the Act, actually. So she was exempted from that, came to live down here in the Gold Coast. And so I've got relatives all around southeast Queensland, but especially here on the coast. And I've got a very talented son, John, who's a published writer and so on. A whole lot of talents he has, and I have a lot of talented relatives anyway, on both sides of my relatives, my families. So as you can see, it's that map. Just the initial point that I wanted to sort of make was that here is hundreds of different groups. They're all autonomous. So autonomy, balance, relationalist ideas and systems are very, very important in Aboriginal thinking. And one of the principal, without going too much into it, but I'll keep coming back to it, one of the most important things that helped us to have a sustainable society and a very old culture over enormous eons of time, really, was how we looked after, had a custodial ethic towards the natural resources, how we actually treated land. So land was something to be looked after. You looked after it, and it taught you what ethics were, because you're actually doing it. You're doing ethics by looking after land. So I agree with all those, the 5 basic points, Michelle, you put up before: sustainability, social justice, and so on. But I wouldn't necessarily see it as a point-by-point area. They all mix, of course, they're all related. But especially those first 2, I think that the first 2, the sustainability, looking after the land, and social justice, in our way of thinking, they go together, actually. They are totally, totally interwoven. So, so there's no such thing as, say, for example, a civilizational state, a state which is an organized entity that takes over the control of the whole of society. So we didn't have a state, obviously, but we did have a civilizational culture. So the culture said that we, all of us in our own particular areas, we're owners and runners. And I know the old way of saying it is, well, the land owns us and we don't really own the land. But actually we do own the land, but just not the white fella's way, with a piece of paper and so on and so on, and treating it as property or real estate or territory. So our idea of ownership is that the country, our traditional area is country. So country has a spiritual element to it, underpinning, if you like. So you can never actually take over somebody else's country. So invasion was a foreign concept, actually, invading somebody else's territory to take it over. So we didn't end up with hierarchies. We ended up with a flat system, heterarchy, or lateral system, if you like. And that sort of strategy, plus the relationalist idea of how we got on with each other, combined with a custodial ethic of looking after the land, not damaging it, not exploiting it, not treating it cruelly, was the blueprint for the kind of society you have. So the two go together, basically. The two of them go together. And an interesting thing that I always think of when I'm thinking about, looking after the kind of system or change or structure that we can have, I think about a huge, big country with a huge, big population like China. They looked at, first of all, helping and assisting, and they're still doing it because it's still poor in many areas, of lifting about 600 or 700 million, you can't believe it, 600 or 700 million people out of poverty. So their level out of poverty is still really low compared to the West. But the thing is that they looked at, and they couldn't do anything else but do this, is that you look after the people first, because they're in such a bad way, such a, the economy, the poverty, and so on and so on. So look after them, and that's right, that's a custodial ethic. Look after them, get them out of poverty so they are looking after themselves. They have jobs, they have better housing, they have and so on and so on and so on. Their life is better. It's turned over. Now they can start looking after the land itself, and their environmental sort of plans and planning and what they're doing is that's what comes next. So, and they're an old society themselves, but they've been through very hard times, of course, over the thousands of years. But our way would be to, and it's actually happening, is that a huge number of us work in their own areas. They're not moving to look for more jobs, although some people do look for more jobs in cities and townships, places where there were or are jobs, regional centres and so on, to go and try and earn money for the pet family and so on. But at the same time, they want to get back, and they do get back to looking after their own land, because that's still it's the equivalent of a Confucianist ideal for the Chinese. Our ideals, our values are tied up with land. So the idea of the land being the source of the law, that is the law, the obligatory law, the law of obligation of looking after everybody and looking after the land. They go together. They go together like a horse and carriage, that you can't really separate them. You can't have one without the other, unless your country is so poverty-stricken or ruined by war. You have to look after the people first. So there's plenty of poverty in this country too, of course. Lots of different Aboriginal communities where there's terrible social problems, and lots of a fair amount of poor white fellows in different regions and cities and in townships and so on and so on. So, yeah, in a sense, I see the urgent thing as being you have to do both at the same time. For example, if we were if by some magic or hypothetical, somebody said to Aboriginal people, well, you know, you ran the place for so long, here, you go and run the place now, kind of thing. How would we start? How would we start, eh, Ross? I know you've got some very good things to say about that too. Where would we start? Well, the first thing, probably, we'd make sure that there are no more homeless people ever. Nobody is homeless. Nobody is out in the cold. Yeah, you absolutely have to make sure that there is not one homeless people and no poverty and things like that. Look after them at the same time as boosting really hugely of looking after land. And of course, that means, of course, disagreeing really kind of fiercely with government. Maybe to the extent of the what do they call it? What do you call it? Extinction Rebellion kind of thing. Power to the people. You know, you can put it in any way you like, but somehow argue back against governments that get more or less they serve only the very rich, the extremely rich, and the very powerful, and the very idea of large multinational corporations, incorporated, powerful incorporations that have more rights than people. That would stop. That Aboriginal people would just simply stop that. Humans would have rights first over that sort of thing, you know. So it would certainly be made into a much fairer place, you know. The whole population, the whole stream of how a society is run. Can we go to that?
Yeah, did you want that slide?
Yeah, that sort of thing. So those sorts of things, to Aboriginal people and many Indigenous people around the world, it's a no-brainer. You know, you put the earth first. The earth gives birth to humans. All the flora and fauna around the place, they're our ancestors. So they're our relatives. I mean, literally our relatives. So you're obliged to look after them. And of course, we're obliged to look after all of our families and relatives and so on and so on, not just special sectors like here are the very, very well off, and here are the middle well off, and here are the poor. And then there are the deserving poor, and then there are the whole lot of different classes and castes and so on and so on. So put the earth first, use that as an integrity or moral template for the kind of society you have. Ban short-termism. This whole idea is to do all of this in the long term. Think and talk and discuss and argue, and again, you know, rinse and repeat. Think and talk and argue, and so on and so on. And I'm not disagreeing with hubs, Michelle. I'm not saying that, but could we turn hubs into what I think is a wonderful idea? It's a whitefellow's idea in different places, are people's assemblies or citizens' assemblies, you know, as a political and economic kind of system, so that they actually do get together somehow. I don't know how, but in different regions, there might be like the say the local government that is actually running the whole region, you know, but they can't actually, you know, they're not taken any notice of by government, but they make themselves known. They have particular kind of relations with the local media. They get onto the media themselves, and so on and so on. But the idea of a people's assemblies or citizens' assemblies is very close to the idea of the Aboriginal consensus style of decision making. And this is the other thing you mightn't like, nobody might like, although it can be kind of work this way. It's not really much to do with democracy. So you might be interested to know that there used to be a place called, an organisation called the National Congress. It was Aboriginal people's own idea of how to have a representation. And it was put together by Aboriginal people. It didn't last because it was deliberately starved of funding, deliberately ignored, and so on. And so the government got sick and tired of it and gave it away. But in the organising of it, something very interesting happened. There was research went around all over the place, researchers interviewing, forums, focus groups, and so on, asking Aboriginal people, what kind of system do you want as representative? And the majority of them, something like between 70 and 80%, said, we don't want anything like the Aboriginal and Islander, what do you call it? ATSIC.
ATSIC.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ATSIC, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission, because that was based on democracy. So what they were saying, the majority of Aboriginal people, is that we don't want anything like democracy because it's too reliant on the individual. And who do you vote for? Basically, the big democracy. You only got a choice of two people, and you only get this choice once every couple of years, 3 years. So how do people have power back to themselves? How do they do that? So these are some of the things that the political people's assemblies and citizens' assemblies could actually really get into changing the system by trying to work out what suits. And those ideas, assemblies, that's a whitefellow's idea, a recent modern development. So, yes, Indigenous knowledge and caring for country. Um, the whole idea about the rangers, Indigenous rangers right across the whole continent. Ross has fantastic things to say about that. He's far more knowledgeable about those things than I am. I have relatives down here who do work with the local government and different what do you call it, environmental groups all around. So yes, big investment in ecological restoration, definitely led by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, about land, about waterways, freshwater, saltwater, the land itself, incredible things. I didn't realise how little I knew about fire stick farming, the use of fire, until the other day. There was this a mate of yours, Ross. I remember him as a very young person,
Yeah,
from up
Barry.
north, Anne's Barry. Yeah,
Barry Hunter. Yeah.
yeah, and he was talking about it, and it just amazed everybody, what that actually meant. But that's what Ross knows all this too. So centres, community-based knowledge centres for all Australians to care about this caring for country. Everything from the knowledge base about the land itself, about time and space, everything from how communities and societies worked. They're brilliant books, as a lot of people already know. Bruce Pascoe, The Dark Emu, Bill Gamage, The Greatest Estate on Earth. They talk about, I would love for people to buy those books, invest in those books, and read them thoroughly and pass them around to their family and relatives, because they tell you also how Aboriginal people technically ran the country. Technically, it's amazing. A justice and police system, oh my God, that is a big one that we would require, that everybody would require, but especially Aboriginal people, because Indigenous people across the world, wherever colonialism and imperialism went, it brought a policing, punitive, coercive system of keeping now there's an old colonial term about pacifying the natives. Now, pacifying the natives has gone on for centuries and centuries. And the awful thing is, but it's expected. I don't know why more people didn't expect this, but that pacifying the native system, it works on a whole lot of people besides natives. And it starts to happen, and it has already started to happen, because everything that imperialism stands for is starting to get very, very shaky. The climate change, the global environment, the economic environment, the social environment, it's all getting very, very, very shaky. So the idea of, pacifying the natives, it's going to start going outside everybody. It's going to, the poor will get hit first, which is already happening. The very, very poor. Food banks, huge growth. Those you showed it just before, didn't you, Michelle? The what's the names?
The acceleration.
Yes, yeah, the poverty is, and it's hard to think or believe that, how could it happen in a place like Australia? It's a wonderful country, and so on and so on. But Here, down here on the Gold Coast, quite often you'll see it looks okay, it might look okay, but there are heaps of hidden poverty here. Hidden poverty, hidden domestic violence, all kinds of not very good social welfare, social stuff, homelessness and so on and so on. So yes, I mean, as far as re-looking at that, a whole lot of things have to be changed there. And really, it is to do with, and if people are offended by this, I don't know. I'm sorry, but it's an uncivilized system to have people being forced. Do you know what I mean? In that way, and to be bashed. And I'm not just talking about Black Lives Matter. I do also believe Black Lives Matter, definitely, but all lives matter also. And I've heard some terrible things about that kind of thing. So it just needs a better law and order system. And what is it? What is it about? Racism, yeah. Education, a better education system should be addressing all of those sorts of things. If you had a knowledgeable system, a knowledgeable, system, for example, things like learning about society in schools. And I'm thinking of, I'm a great believer in that philosophy should be taught in schools. And three kinds of philosophy. The main one, of course, well, for us, is Aboriginal philosophy, Aboriginal culture should be taught in schools. Western philosophy, of course, which is already there and applicable in some schools to different grades. And of course, and I know this might sound strange to people, but I would put in there Chinese philosophy or Asian philosophy. And because they've got so many different religions and philosophies, you'd have to be a choice thing. So the three of them, because Australia is in this region called Australasia. Do you know, it's here in this region, and it's very kind of special. These are the neighbours, and Aboriginal people have always had an old system, this custodial ethic of getting on with your neighbours, getting on with them, and you can, even given conflict, even if you did have conflict, but you had, but because you didn't have the idea of invasion, conflict was managed, but also conflict was managed by having a very well thought out system of looking after natural resources. So you looked for things like natural resources to bring people together, not to separate out people. So you didn't have an idea of, oh, well, these people have the best water here, or they have the best hunting in their region. Let's just sort of stroll over there and take it over. They're doing all these things wrong. They should be doing it like we do it. All of that had nothing to do with it. It was like built-in diplomatic traditions. They were already there. This is how we collaborate. This is how we work together to look after, and that helps. You can see how it's a no-brainer. That helps the region. That helps the land, the environment. Plus, it helps the society. Absolutely. So that next one, that's what I'm really talking about, the investing heavily in that way, in formal and informal education. The thing of forgiving debts, the forgiveness of debts. Now, I didn't know about that because it's kind of not applicable in a way, but those ancient societies, mainly in the Middle East, I'm not quite sure about China, but they had something they called a jubilee. Every couple of years, all debts were forgiven. And it wasn't because they necessarily had kind rulers. Some of the rulers, pharaohs, emperors, kings, whatever, they were pretty tough on their own people, and yet they all had this idea, this system of forgiveness of debts every couple of years. And I thought that is very, very smart. It's smart economically, very smart. If you forgive debts, people aren't in debt and getting worried. It's smart socially, so you don't have a very, very angry, resentful population, that rebels against the people who are keeping them in debt, and so on and so on. And by the same token, they don't turn against their rulers, and so on and so on. So just imagine if you had forgiveness of debts still in this way here. I don't know how it could be worked out, but if and when we do have these, through NENA, the hubs plus assemblies, the really smart economic people, they could work that out. They could work this out. I'm quite certain. But just imagine student debt. I think, if I'm not mistaken, in this country, it's millions and millions of dollars. Just simply wipe that out. Just simply, and in America, it's something close to like $1 trillion. Can you imagine our student debt? If that was just wiped out, you'd be able to have a national health system, you know, in the US, you know. So, and accountability, absolutely. Aboriginal people have been saying this for a long, long time. The states, local council, and the government itself, that you never hear clear any kind of clarity about the accountability of spending. You don't. You have to do some very good, clever research into it, speak to the right people, years of research, and so on and so on. And unless you're working in government, in finance, say, you might have a clue about it. But you would be amazed at the amount of money that is spent on Aboriginal affairs. It's something like, so I've been told, it's something around about up around about and over $20 billion per year. This is what I hear. This is what people in finance and the, I always forget their name now, the government department to do with looking at government spend, actually, and I cannot think of that.
The national audit or something?
National, yeah, something like national audit, the audit people, something like that, yes. But what I've also heard is that the actual amount of money that somehow gets to Aboriginal communities and people, and not as handouts, nothing like that, just actually gets to communities on the ground, is something like 12% or 15% of all that huge amount of money, huge amount of money. And that's what I mean. They may as well give the whole amount of money to all Aboriginal people, you know, and so on. So universal basic income, from what I understand, I don't fully understand these things, but it sounds great. It sounds great. And again, it's a bit like forgiveness of debt. You know, because that's the thing why things are getting a bit shaky. If a country's population starts to lose any confidence, lose big time confidence in their rulers, local government, ancient places, and so on, things start getting very upset. So economically, I think, and sound psychology, you know what I mean? It's sound socially, you know, the idea of a universal, that's the impression I get as much as I understand it. You know? And of course, massive investment in renewables. And again, I don't know if as much, Ross probably knows more about this, and of course, Michelle, but renewable seems, again, a no-brainer. I don't know why it's so difficult. I know some people say it costs more or something, but I'm not quite sure what they mean by all of that.
It doesn't now, Auntie. It definitely doesn't now. It's actually cheaper.
Yeah, well, I don't know why some people are saying that, no, it costs more because just to make, say, things on the roof, what do you call it? Solar panels and so on, you still got to use, I don't know, electricity and oil and various things, you know. I'm not quite sure what it all means, but...
Spin doctors.
Yeah, spin doctors.
Yeah,
yes.
the fossil fuel industry loves to tell us that it's the end of the world if we shift. But
yes, yeah, it's not right.
There are, of course, minerals involved in the creation of those panels and such, but it's, anyway, there's a lot of trading off you can do that's still a lot better than setting fire to the planet through fossil fuels. So.
Absolutely, yes. And might be an idea to put those statistics up again too. But yes, housing is probably one of the worst things. You would think it's health, but it is bad health, partly because Aboriginal people aren't running their own affairs. They could, you know, I'm not putting down the amount of money, but Aboriginal people, honestly, if you have Aboriginal people running Aboriginal affairs, you know what I mean? To me, that's a no-brainer, because they know how to do these things. And believe it or not, we actually ran a whole country once before everybody else. So literally before everybody else, tens of thousands of years of working it out, how to run a country, with a completely different social and political ordering, of course, and not with the kind of technology, obviously, you know, all that. But look, I wouldn't mind just leaving it there, I guess. But one little thing, and I don't know how, this might be very hard, but because it's hard to get away from it, escape from the TV set and news and media in general. But the idea, where does the idea of why choice is always seen as a special thing that we must not be deprived of? I mean, why would you? Where's the use of having like a dozen different brands of toothpaste? Do you know what I mean? And a whole range, hundreds of different styles of cars and so on and so on. What I would love to see, what would come out, but this would be a really practically impossible thing because people are so sold on consumerism that it's like it's in the genes, consumerism, you know, is to actually choose to be poorer. Do you know what I mean? Just choose a simpler life, a poorer life, and get rid of the idea of the world as oyster. The world isn't your oyster. Do you know what I mean? It ceased to be that a long time ago, actually. It never, and for our lot, our way, the world, you simply cannot see the world as oyster. You know what I mean? You do whatever you like. Nothing must stand in your way of doing what you want. I want what I want, and I must have what I want. That philosophy, that's got to be gotten rid of. Do you know?
And
anyway,
Mary,
leave it there. Leave it there.
Thank you so much, Mary. I was just going to quickly say that in Western societies, the voluntary simplicity movement, slow food,
yes, that's right. Yeah,
it's wonderful because people are connecting with those ideas of, you know,
yes,
we've got an overproduction problem. Corporates are interested in that, and therefore we have an overconsumption problem. And how do we nail that down?
We definitely have an overconsumption problem. I know,
and an overproduction problem
physically.
Yeah,
I know.
But thank you so much, Mary.
Yes, love.
I'm just going to turn that off, and I'm sure people can join me with a little air clap. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is the daggy things I do in Zoom now.
It is daggy.
Yes. Very daggy. Now, Mary, before I turn to Ross, I'm not sure, you mentioned you may have to scoot off.
Yes.
I don't know if anyone has a quick question for Mary, you might have time for one. But
a couple of questions, yes, if you want.
Yeah, and then we'll turn to Ross. But does anyone have any questions? We had some lovely comments in here, people saying, wow, this is amazing. I hope Mary's talk is being recorded.
Oh yeah, it's all being recorded, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll be on the NENA website within a few days, hopefully.
Great. I would love, sorry, could I just say one thing? I would love it if people have an idea about the idea of people's assemblies or citizen assemblies, or some people have thought of it in terms of deliberative democracy, if you must have the democracy word. and remember, the Chinese state lifted 600-700 million people out of poverty, all without democracy. But of course, a totalitarian country can do that. You know what I mean? It can, because there's no parties to fight about it, and very, very, very rich, powerful people are coming in and saying, no, there's all sorts of wonderful ideas why you can't do that, you know. So, you know, think about that. Yeah.
It's interesting. And Mary, there are a number of people in the NENA network who are equally as passionate as you about citizens' assemblies. And I know that, I don't think anyone tonight is from the Coalition of Everyone, but I believe that the Hunter Newcastle hub, the NENA hub, has been working with the Coalition of Everyone and have been talking about the citizens' assemblies they're starting to run in Newcastle. So they've been
wonderful.
Victoria, and so they're out there.
Oh, that's great. Would they be being recorded, do you think?
I don't know, Mary.
Or just written up about, reported on, you know, that sort of thing. Yeah. Anyway, okay.
Find out for you. Yeah. But thank you, Mary.
Okay.
Oh, cool. So we've got somebody, Kimberly and Tom, are saying they're a community Coalition of Everyone rep. Awesome. Well, maybe I actually think the Democracy and Governance Hub, which Megan Burkett and other folks are putting together, has got a focus on citizens' assemblies. So I think as soon as they are ready and want to run a webinar on what they do, I'll make sure you join us for that one, Mary.
Oh, that's wonderful. Because I can just see it, you know. I don't know, the Tamworth Citizens Assembly is really, really angry about such and such and such and such, and tells the local government and the state government, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. You just start doing it, you know. Start doing it. Don't argue about the theory of it. Forget theory. Just do it, you know.
I think that sounds great. And someone's commented, Kimberly has commented that Sonia Rendawa from COA is keen. She's actually, now that you've mentioned her name, she's the other with Megan Burkett to set up the Democracy and Governance NENA Hub. And the hubs are more just a landing place for people to start to generate a bit of work together. So
that's great.
Excellent.
Yep.
Well, look, I'm pretty sure that if we paused long enough, everyone would have questions for you, Mary. But given it's 7, and I'd love to have Ross share some insights. And Mary, I think we'll just say, if you need to jump off and go to your other meeting, thank you. But if you can stay on, please stay on.
Yeah. No, I might have to go because I've got to go to a place and then go to do some other things.
Absolutely.
But what I was going to say was the email. If people have, they're really keen to ask a question about something, email. You can give them my email if you like.
Yes, not a problem. And for those who don't know, you can start with nina@neweconomy.org.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And if you want to talk to Mary, I can then flick your email to Mary, and if she has time, she'll get back in touch. So. Thank you again so much, Mary, and look forward to further discussions with you and the gang in the NENA space. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Mary.
So I'll just pop you on.
Thanks, Ross.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And Ross. So Ross Williams is based here in Brisbane. I met Ross about 20 years ago, actually, when he was working in National Parks and Wildlife, and I was working with the Gungaloo community on some national parks and MOU work. But I might let Ross introduce himself and his own background and communities. Over to you, Ross. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Auntie Mary. I always, every single moment I listen to Auntie Mary, I always get some new information, new intelligence, new dynamics, new way of looking at things. And I think that's why any sort of new economy should look. There's a lot of good experienced people around the place that have really good knowledge around hubs and things like that. That's really important for us as First Nations people. I mean, we have our own hubs. We've had our own hubs for roughly around 65,000 years, maybe, give or take a couple 100,000. It's all relevant. But the practice has been exactly how it is today. And I think one of the things that I think we forget about is that we've been doing this stuff for a long time, and nothing's changed. The only thing that's changed is the colonisation, the impact on colonisation and the introduction of which one I call a new economy on us, and that has been destructive, exploitative, and downright damaging. But I think now that we're refocusing around new economy, we're talking about new economy redressed by the old economy in a new way. I'll leave that with you and let you mull over that, and if you want to go listen back to the recording about that. But the economic reality for us as Indigenous people has been its impact in reality. The reason why you don't see a lot of Indigenous people talking about a new economy is that, they're going to come back to us because they're going to look at the redress and look at us in terms of our economy and the way we operate. When we talk about economy and with Indigenous people, we're talking about fundamental processes of food security. And that food security for a new economy is so critical. Where a lot of laws and legislation has taken away our responsibility to actually partake of our native foods and so forth. Despite all that, we still do. And people say, you're breaking the law. Well, not our law. If you think we're breaking your law, then that's a matter for you to resolve, not us. Our economy relies quite heavily on economics. And Auntie Mary was talking about, we talk about a lot of expenditure around Indigenous related matters. And that expenditure is expenditure. And I think what we really got to get to thinking about is, as Auntie Mary was talking about, I'd like to think of it as we need to refigure it, not as expenditure, but as investment. When we look at it as investment, we look at it in a different way, and we look at the economy in a different way. For us Indigenous people, it's recognising our economy, understanding our economy first and foremost, and then allowing us to produce our economy. Now, when Auntie Mary was talking about the 12% of it actually gets to Indigenous communities, previously, that number hasn't changed. There's about 77% of money that's provided into Indigenous programs and initiatives that actually goes into administration. Roughly 13% of that goes to the actual programs and the outcomes for Indigenous people. That's another government thing that hides it. We talk about a civil society. I always question the oxymoron around civil and society. And we think that it's not very civil. It has never been civil since the introduction of non-First Nations people into this country. And I want to say it in that context. I think we need to rebadge our language, why we, rather than saying, you know, white people or whatever, we've got to rebadge it in a way that is less conflicting, but also spreads a bit of the load for everybody in terms of that it's the impact of non-First Nations people. When we talk about, and Auntie Mary just mentioned, you know, we are shaping and we are changing the way we look at it in terms of new economy. We're looking at Tesla, for instance, with all the electric cars and stuff. The planet is changing. And we've got to focus, you know, on one of those things as well. Tesla itself, or the Tesla cars and Elon Musk, the actual sales and the production of those vehicles are far outweighing Ford, Chevy and Chrysler in America. And it's sent massive shockwaves through the car industry and so forth as well. People are going to argue the toss around the producing of those cars, you know, equally is economically damaging in terms of battery and so forth. But we're moving away from fossil fuels, and that's one of the most critical things. And I look, and with all due respect to people that have been affected by the COVID virus, for instance, I also see, and Indigenous people also see the environmental benefits from shutdown of no planes in the sky to the less burning of fossil fuels for cars and so forth, less movement. It's had a positive thing. It has a positive relationship to our environment. When we talk about our economy in terms of Indigenous people, well, eventually the new economy is going to come back to an old way of thinking. And what we do is look at that Indigenous people are less inclined to be involved in this new discussion around the new economy because it's the old economy and you'll come to us in terms of discussions and so forth. So we reshape a bit around humans and the way humans are interacting with our environment. For us right now as Indigenous people, and I'm talking predominantly in regional remote areas, we still rely quite heavily on the food security, and that's the economy around food supply. So natural resources make up a big amount of our economic balance, if you like, because with our native foods, we still rely quite heavily in a lot of remote areas, still rely on a lot of native foods. And a lot of people think, oh, you know, they're all living in cities and remote areas, living in cities and so forth. Well, there's a lot of Indigenous people that actually live in remote and regional areas, the large population. So when we talk about dietary complex, we're talking about, well, Indigenous people use, well, I don't know, I'd like to, I was thinking about this today and around what do we do in terms of native foods? And there's so much native foods, and we're probably working or eating roughly 100, 150, 200, maybe even more traditional foods, whether it's berries, and getting medicine from trees and stuff. So it still happens quite a bit outside of what people try to make out. We rely quite heavily on shellfish and seafood, for instance. On the coastal people, there's a lot of food and yabbies and berries and stuff that we still quite heavily rely on. We see people living in an urban situation, they still do a lot of hunting or external fishing, if you like, even with a rod. I still do it with a spear. Not very good at it, but I prefer to use a fishing line. I get more success out of that. So those are the economic realities. For Indigenous people, for instance, I did a study about 25 years ago in one of the communities in the Cape York around the actual balance of the economy and what that looks like and how much it costs in reality. And for instance, and I don't want to alarm people, it's just a fact of reality, is that like a dugong, for instance, would provide food for at least 10 to 12 families for 6 months. And the equation in terms of cattle, beef, if you like, lamb, pork, and so forth, was economically way off the scale. And I looked at, I'm trying to remember how much it cost, but for those families, it would have cost roughly around $12,000 to $13,000 over that 6-month period for those introduced animals. Whereas a dugong could feed a family for that same period, and the rough cost to actually get that dugong was about $600 to feed 6 families for 6 months. Purely in terms of economics, it doesn't take much to work out. Fish was plentiful, and so the economy is shifting, and the balance of that. So what we try to do is make sure that the dietary difference with introduced Western foods is roughly around 13 to 20%, or 20 different types of foods that we buy from the store. And in reality, the harsh reality in remote and regional Indigenous communities is that, and this might come to a shock to some people, but if to buy a tin of powdered milk will cost you $80. To buy a coffee, a normal bottle of coffee will cost you $50. To buy a pound of meat, which is second, third grade, will cost you roughly around $50 a kilo. So if you equate the economics in that, it is just off the scale. And we're trying to get a redress around the food economy and how that works within the communities. So are they worried about changing the planet? No, they're worried about survival and how do we actually survive. My role and Auntie Mary's role is to try and provide that intermediate medium between people that are not aware of the sensitivities around, cultural obligations and social obligations, cultural beliefs, and cultural needs of resources, and the importance of that relationship. And when we talk about hunting and gathering and stuff, we still do it. I still do it. It's really culturally important for me, and it's also a very important cultural well-being issue for me, as much as it is for people throughout. If you're connected to culture, you're connected to your well-being. And like rangers, we talk about rangers, Indigenous rangers, it's not a job, it's an obligation. And a lot of those rangers dealing in those areas, it's always an obligation to look after the country. Why do we have national parks? Well, we have segments of land that's set aside economically or environmentally so that non-First Nations people can go and experience the natural world or the wilds. Why do we have them? Well, the destruction of everywhere else. So we're left with the remainder of these land parcels. People think that national parks are set aside because it's a beautiful place to go. Well, no, we're trying to protect as much as we can. And that's why, environmentally, we need to look at how we're engaging and how we're self-destructing. So, with a lot of those issues around ranges and even talked about fire stick management. Michelle was talking about that. If you look at the book Fire Sticks and with Victor Stephenson, the whole fire management principle is not about fire, it's about what our country looks like. how it was and what we need to do in order to look after our country. People look at that as the fire country is saying, well, this is how you burn. Well, yes, because the environment in Australia needs that type of burn. Variations in burns, where we burn, how we burn, what time we burn, what plants and animals rely on that burn, and what the shape of that burning looks like. And I think Auntie Mary touched on it, where we had a mate of mine, Barry Hunter, talked about the fire burning. It's an incredible thing to see, and I think Michelle got a surprise when she saw the difference in terms of fire burning and that sort of stuff. So animals get a top opportunity to leave or exit the location when it's time to burn, so that the soils don't get burnt. The soil is not hot, so you can actually, once the fire is gone over, you can pick up that soil in your hand, and it's just beautiful. You don't kill the microbes. So it's all this knowledge and all this intelligence around this is all a part of the new economy. What we want to get back to is ultimately sharing the knowledge of how we need to address the old way of doing things in a new economy. We can't keep doing what we're doing. We're self-destructing, and that, I keep on trying to forget her name, Michelle, the monkey lady.
Anne Goodall.
Anne Goodall. She
Yeah.
made a brilliant statement about a week or 2 weeks ago that we're not caring for we're not, what she said is basically we're destroying our children's future. It's point blank. We are destroying their future by what we're doing right now. And so when we talk about with NENA and the economic hubs and that sort of stuff, I think it's really great. But let's work out, how do we actually listen to others, and what can that look like across the whole landscape within Australia? If we do our little bit in our particular location, we get to understand our location, we get to understand what we're doing. And there was a key word that I always come back to: we're all, and all can be, change agents. And that is critical for all of us. What can we do at a supermarket? Do we need to buy those products with plastic around them? There's choices that we make, but we've got to make conscious choices about our behaviour in terms of environmental destruction, and then dealing with others in terms of economics. So we can play a critical part. Simple things like even growing your own, herbs and stuff in your own garden, and vegetables. Fantastic if you've got the opportunity to do it. If you live in a one-bedroom unit, you can still do it. You have a balcony, or you can, there's a whole variety of different ways to look at how do we contribute to the new economy and become change agents for everybody. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you, Ross. Another little daggy air clap. Thank you. And actually, Ross, your talk touched on something that reminded me. I think it's Nick Rose's group, Sustain, has actually been doing a pretty amazing survey of pandemic community gardens across Australia. I might dig up the info on that and make sure it's on the NENA website, but I might send it to you, Ross. They're doing a survey, and apparently thousands and thousands of people have been sharing with them the fact that they've gotten chickens, they've started planting more veggies, and simple tasks like growing our own food, where we can, certainly contributes to small-scale producers as opposed to large-scale consumers. So,
yeah, getting back to those basics. I mean, we used to do that when I was growing up. 50 years ago. We used to be able to have tank water, and we used to be able to grow our own veggies and do the little types of things. It's all been taken away through regulations and stuff. We really need to look at addressing some of those fundamental basics that have taken away our right to do certain things within our local areas and local communities.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ross, for sharing with us and being part of our discussion tonight. If anyone has any burning questions for Ross, although I always say burning questions, and I realise it's like a pun on the discussion about fire, which is inappropriate, really. But if anyone has any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, what I might do is ask Ross a question myself and then start to wrap up for the night. So Ross, I was wondering if you and Mary and Anne, Paulina and others who are connected to the NENA First Nations Hub are willing, we might compile some of the suggestions and proposals that you've all been, sharing with us. And it'd be lovely to be able to share that on the website and show some of the ideas that are being discussed. Many folks have heard before, and others no one's been talking about in a kind of a higher profile way. So if that sounds okay to you, it might be also great to ask you to invite some of your other contacts in different organizations to provide input into those ideas. Bit of a wish list, bit of a transformation list, bit of a vision for the future.
Yeah, I think a vision for the future is really critical. And I think we can certainly provide a shoulder to the wheel around the shifting in the new economy space. It's long time needed. And I think we've become so desperate, if you like, to change the way the planet is moving. And we hear a lot of scientists talking about the tipping point, or going past the tipping point. We've all got to, regardless of that, we can help Mother Nature bring it back into some sort of balance, because the pendulum has gone too far the other way. And we're just destroying what we love dearly, which is the planet and our existence as human beings within the planet. We don't think outside really of a comfortable life. Sometimes we have to make uncomfortable decisions and make uncomfortable choices about what we do on this planet and how we do as human beings before we can make a real shoulder to the grindstone shift and call it out for what it is. Don't be afraid to be calling out some of the behaviours, some of the things that are not acceptable. And we are change. We are the change agents, and we can become that as a part of the hub process, I would suggest.
Thank you, Ross. It's actually a really good question here from Sally. She says, just wondering, there's a lot of emphasis on tourism in today's economy. Does that have a place in the old economy? I'm wondering, Sally, if you mean the pre-colonised Australia economy. But either way, Ross, did you want to comment on the role of tourism perhaps pre-colonial times and post-colonial times?
We never used to have, I guess, posts, but we used to invite people to come along onto country and share some knowledge and experience, and people who also come to our country. And we've got to remember that map that Ani showed, that's all nation states. We're not one group. We're not Indigenous people. We're Indigenous peoples. First Nations peoples, very much like Europe. We are divided into different nations. We have different languages, different rules, laws, LORE as well. So all that is very complex in itself. Tourism, we're taking an opportunity. We're trying to educate people about our life and about what we have to offer, what our sites look like. How does it relate to us as human beings? We talk about 65,000 years, but how do you describe that? And tourism is a good way of letting people understand, get some knowledge about us, who we are, how do we fit into the landscape, what that landscape looks like, what does that landscape provide us if we don't destroy that landscape. So nature will only provide us what we need, and therefore we look after environment. So tourism for us and many groups is really, really important economically. Because I think, well, if we're going to teach people about this, we should make some money out of it as well. Let's get some money into our economy. That economy then goes into, improvement of services, that goes into employment opportunities for Indigenous communities. And so it builds up that local economy that then provides food and nourishment and so forth, even as basic as computers for kids. We think that that reality is, if they should be able to get access to computers. Well, no, it's not as easy as that. And I go back to talking about the amount of cost to actually maintain a lifestyle, or any sort of lifestyle. It's really not a lifestyle, it's an existence. So tourism provides an opportunity to educate people about culture, cultural ways, and how that fits in. And if people then think about it in an economic sense, they start to work out, okay, maybe that's what we do. But we try and train people around culture what our cultural development is, what our cultural knowledge is, looking at them plants, looking at them species of birds, even down to fungi, you know. That's all really important for our economy. And it's teaching people to understand who we are, what we do, and how we fit into the landscape. I think that's the critical part.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Ross. So I am looking at the time and it's 7:20, and I think it might be a nice time to wrap up. We've been on the call since 6 o'clock, so I'm really grateful to all of you for sharing your evening with us. And if there are no other questions at this stage, we'll start to wrap up. And just a final reminder, the NENA website, I will make sure that the strategy template is up there. We're going to start annoying everybody very cheerfully through the email list, through a very simple survey that we'll probably put on SurveyMonkey, and encouraging all of the active hubs to really start thinking about what ideas they want to share. And then we'll have the fun task of pulling them all together, and we'll be showing people probably August, September, October. I hope that we will be able to bring together lots and lots of initial terrific ideas from people around the network. And some of them will be, I suspect, points of complete agreement across the sectors. Most people will agree in the shifting away from fossil fuel reliance and moving into sustainable food, etc. There'll also be a lot of other issues, I suspect, that are contentious. And what we're keen to do is make sure that NENA is a safe, respectful space to have discussions about differences and different ways forward. Everything from population issues to, do we want universal basic income or life guarantee or something else? And the conferences will be a way for many people to come together in real time and use some of the citizens' assemblies, participatory processes that Mary talked about. And yeah, we're just going to make this thing up as we go and get as much input as we can. So one of the reasons we've been running these monthly discussions is to make sure that everybody is invited and encouraged to share your ideas. So keep an eye out for some reminders to fill out a survey or reminders to work inside your hub. And yeah, I think that's about it from us. Thank you for the lovely positive comments that folks are putting in the comments. Some thank yous and people enjoying it. Yeah, terrific. So yeah, do keep yourself on our email list. And if you're a member, please do consider becoming a member. We're a cooperative, so the principles of solidarity really matter to us. Every week now, I'm sending out a little members update just to collate the sheer volume of meetings and webinars and lovely activities. And I'm hoping every month to continue with our general newsletter to anyone who signs up to the newsletter on the website. So without further ado, I shall do a wrap up. Thank you to the folks who are saying thank you to us. And with double and triple thank yous, we'll wind it up. Ross, did you want to just say goodnight or anything else you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just want to say goodnight and thanks for the question, Sally, and to others. I think I really appreciate that. I guess one of the things that was told to me a long time ago is, and people probably would have heard it, their affluence is our effluence. And it still stands true today. The affluence will destroy us, and we end up with their crap. So, but other than that, good night, and happy to say hello and give you and talk to you. Really appreciate it.
That's great. Thank you, Ross. Just quickly, someone has asked about the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, if we could invite a speaker. Absolutely. NENA is a founding member of We All. If you look back through the old webinars, there's a talk there by Catherine Trebek about the We All economy. I was actually yarning with her this week for another task, and I'll definitely get some We All and RIPES network folks back to talk with us. Someone's asked about the recording. The recording will be posted as soon as your exhausted NENA volunteers can make that happen. And a reminder, if anyone does want to help out with some of the basic unshiny, unamazing event management and back-end work, do get in touch with me because I'm drowning in work. So the recording will be on the website probably within the next few days, next week at the latest. So on that note, thank you so much, everybody, and we'll see you very soon. And thank you.